Joe Budden crashes out on his co-host over the gender wars.
Why you can't hear from a man that don't have a daughter?
Let her cook, Joe. Let her cook, Joe.
Can I fucking talk?
Yes, I'm sorry.
And because having a daughter changed your perspective on a lot of
Thank
I
you
want
very
to tell you
much.
that.
Don't need a daughter to qualify. We speaking as men. Talking
Hold
about
up.
just
I know, I
men.
understand
We're not
that.
talking about your daughter, your mom, your sister. We got that part. This conversation started and should end with men telling you about men and the erasure of men.
He completely shut down
No, you
everything
can't-
that I
no,
put.
Mel.
No, because I can't respond to the Doshi thing. I can't respond to the
You
bear
can
thing.
Yeah, on the last episode of the Joe Budden podcast, Joe Budden would snap, blow a gasket, look absolutely crazy, but I think it revealed that he's getting fed up with his cast. So what started all of this? Well, Anthony Mackie did some interview with The Pivot and started talking about how men in America are being marginalized, and this turnkey the conversation for the pod to do another gender war topic. Now, the gender wars are a way for podcasters who are struggling to find stuff to talk about to ignite things, and this is what happened on the show. But it revealed very much so about the dynamics of the current cast, and also how people might be getting fed up with Melyssa Ford. Now, we have to underline this with that this was a Melyssa Ford topic, a topic that she wanted to discuss. So please remember that as we talk further deeper about it. I think Joe was just fed up that Melyssa Ford brought the topic up and maybe didn't execute in the way that he thought she would. Now, Melyssa Ford, obviously, because she has to take this stance, says that Mel doesn't think the statement of the decline of the American male is true. And Joe Budden interjects saying, what's our deep dive here? Oh, he's trying to produce. He's saying, all right, you brought this topic up. What are you trying to say about it other than bring it up and just parrot it amongst us? You're not saying anything, Melyssa. Flip then says women have taken on a masculine role, women entering the workforce and now getting bags bigger than the men that they marry or the men that they talk to, that there is more of a masculinity being assumed by women because of capitalism. I think that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing. That's what Flip, I believe, is hinting at. Then Joe says he needs to land. Apparently, Joe simultaneously wants Melyssa Ford to take control of the topic, but also needs to land. So there's a bit of a frustration on Joe, and he's kind of like the point guard that when he passes you the ball, he wants you to shoot. And if you don't shoot, he tries to score. And that's kind of Allen Iverson right now. And then Joe makes an interesting point. I think he really thought he killed with this. He says, you will see a man sucking D before you see him do something masculine. And I thought that was interesting. He was very passionate about it. But I don't know if Joe's passionate about this particular subject or he's more so passionate about how the cast is handling this particular subject, because the gender war topics are getting redundant and Joe is trying to carry his pod and doesn't know what he's getting from them on a show-to-show basis. I think one moment he is like, oh, okay, maybe I'll get something from Flip, maybe I'll get something from Ish, maybe I'll get something from Melyssa Ford. But then during the topic, he's like, man, these guys ain't giving me nothing, so I got to crash out. And you're seeing Joe start to get a little bit more performative, which to me represents a creative deficit going on in the show. So he knows, okay, these guys aren't really bringing it. I got to go up to 10. I got to go Super Saiyan Podfather. It's just what I'm observing. It's just what I'm saying. And I even offer this theory. Joe Budden has been throwing out the idea of a daily podcast. And it was brought up on a Patreon episode when Flip said that he wanted a raise. And Joe said, oh, if you want a raise and you want to get to $30K a month, then we're going to be needing to record every day, basically, during the week. And he said, oh, if I do a daily show, I'm not bringing anyone from this pod here. Now, that signifies that Joe realizes that the current cast has a ceiling, and he would never want to take the dynamics of that cast into a new venture. I'm telling you, that's exactly what that's saying. Then Joe says there's an attack on straight men in America. Now, this is something he's been saying for quite a long time, dating back to when he would say that when he worked at Complex, that, they only seem to promote men who are effeminate or men who don't have masculine traits. Very interesting way Joe phrases this conversation. I think Joe uses this as a safeguard to protect how he treats people. Everybody knows he's capable of screaming down on people and getting angry, and he thinks that's the reason why he may not have succeeded in like places like Complex or, just other places where there's a corporate culture. He thinks corporate culture is creating a ceiling on masculine men, as opposed to maybe his approach to things isn't the best. And then the classic bear topic gets brought up. For those of you that don't know, there was a TikTok challenge where women were asked, hey, would you rather run into a wild bear in the woods or a man? And most women were picking a bear. Now, I think the undertone of this is the idea of sexual violence. Women believe that a bear at the most can kill them, or at the most will run away, whereas a man could get sexually violent. That's the undertone. And that's when the show had this conversation, I think that was what everybody couldn't kind of get. It just caused a lot of friction. And Melyssa Ford, like most women, picked the bear. And because of that, Joe has been bringing that conversation up over and over again. I mean, it's been months and Joe still seems to harp on that point. Then M4 tries to have a daughter convo about, hey, Ice and Flip, you guys have daughters. What do you think about the decline of the masculine role and all of this stuff? And Joe cuts her off immediately because I think his point is valid. Hey, just because I don't have a daughter doesn't mean my voice can't be heard on this subject. You are introducing topics to railroad this conversation and in this debate try to undermine my voice just because I don't have a daughter. And then Ice chimes in and says, you need to have a daughter in order to understand certain things. And that sets Joe off even further. So I get what Joe is saying. And I'm also tired of Ice always talking about his daughters. Always, man, with this family stuff. I mean, I get it. People who have kids, your kid is your world. But then when you start to use that to silence people on subjects that they may be passionate about, it's like, all right, man, I just want to talk about this topic. We're on a podcast. Stop introducing these things that, stop the conversation from happening. But overall, Joe Budden was in rare form. I think people might believe he was potting and people might believe he was angry at the topic. But like I said earlier in this video, he was just upset that the podcast wasn't executing the conversation. He was like, man, I want y'all to move the ball further along and y'all don't want to have a discussion. It's becoming 8th grade talking points. Women are going to agree with women. Men are going to agree with men. And the cast wasn't prepared. Like I said, this was a Mel topic. And, she likes to giggle, cutesy on a lot of things. And then when it's time to carry a conversation, she refers back to the usual talking points you think she would have. I don't think she got the range, man. I actually think she's maybe like Flip in that regard, where she brings something up, but then doesn't execute. Like that player on the NBA team, they want to do a pick and roll, but don't know how to execute it. That's Melyssa Ford. But let me know what you think. Are you tired of the gender war topics? Do you feel like Joe Budden was being belligerent? I mean, this guy wasn't really ready to have a discussion either. None of these people seem to educate themselves on the topics they want to talk about, which is why there's a ceiling. And I think they do need to curate the gender war conversation a little bit better. Are they trying to be like tonight's conversation? Because they don't got it. They don't got it. And maybe it's because they go to the gender war too much. Just try to diversify. Hell, even bring in a different voice. If Joe is so frustrated that Melyssa Ford is not having the dialogue about gender war conversations, bring in another woman that maybe might add to it. I remember Bridget Kelly used to be on the show, and she would do a decent job of it, but that was on the Patreon. I don't think she was ever on the regular episode. She was on the regular episode with Rory and Mo, but I'm talking about at length, talking about gender war topics. Let me know what you think. Do you think Joe Budden is just frustrated? Do you think he was really caring about the decline of the American male, or was he just sad at the decline of his podcast? All right, follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. Follow me on Patreon, The Stop. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.